Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, I'm back again, even though I said Happy New Year at the end of the last video. I think I did say that I would come back though if I felt there was something else I could talk about. And do you know what? I had to do loads of kind of work about looking forward to the transfer window and stuff, and I was talking to so many different people within the game, agents, people at the club, managers, people connected with players, everything, that I kind of put together a piece or two, and I kind of thought, you know what, I might as well just talk about it as well. And also doubled up with the fact that we had Antonio Conte's press conference today. I thought, you know what, I might squeeze in one more quick video for anyone that wants it. You know, if you don't want it, please scroll on by. Don't even worry about it. But I just thought maybe a little bit of Conte and also transfers might actually make for an interesting video compared to, talking about matches and stuff like that. Although we're going to have a lot of transfer talk, don't worry, over the next month or so. It's going to be fun and games. Start with the press conference because it was an interesting one. I was actually come to a little bit earlier in the press conference. I'm used to normally being either the last or penultimate questions. So I kind of get to a nice sense of what's happened so far, anything that I want to follow up on, but also have the things that I want to ask. Whereas in this one, I think I was come to quite quickly because there weren't any radio questions. So I'm trying to remember. I think it was, way up there in the pecking order, which caught me off guard a little bit, but it was fine. It was fine. We roll with these things. Obviously, straight off the bat, first thing was team news. Injury-wise, or just players returning. Obviously, Richarlison's still out with his hamstring injury. Christian Romero is back, of course. He's been training since, what was it, Sunday? It was whatever the 27th was. I lost track of time with the festive period. But he's back, available for selection for the Villa game, so that's fantastic. Unfortunately, bad news on Rodrigo Bentancur. Here's Conte's quotes for you. Straight from the horse's mouth, or the manager's mouth. Romero is back, he's back and he's available for the Aston Villa game. But Rodrigo, I think we have to wait. Maybe today he's going to have an MRI to try to have an evaluation about his injury, but for sure against Aston Villa he's not available. And he was asked, it sounds like he might be out for a while. He said, but he had... You often find this, it's really difficult. If you're reading a transcript, Conte will often say to something. And sometimes he's not actually saying to your question. It's almost like a first word that he puts in there. And it can be quite confusing. Sometimes people think he's saying, he's out for a while. The truth is, they don't really know. So his answer was, he had an injury during the World Cup. And then also the timing is longer than my expectation. But these questions are more for the medical department than me. Conte in the medical department, eh? Fun and games. So some people, when I put that out earlier, slightly misunderstood that as meaning that he was having his first scan all these weeks after his injury. That's not the case. When a player's got an injury, especially if it's taking a little bit longer to heal from, they'll have multiple MRI scans, and that's what the case is here. It's just constantly being checked to see why it's not quite healing. If you weren't aware, it's a small tear in his adductor muscle in his right leg, if I remember correctly, for Bentancur. Obviously a big loss because he has been superb, or he was superb before the World Cup, and also had quite a decent World Cup as well until the injury. So looks like you'd imagine it'll be Basuma and Højbjerg again. And now we just need to find out how long he's going to be out for. But obviously, it's one of those you don't want to rush him back from at all. But yeah, it is another one of these, and I know why people are going to get frustrated because they see a player expected back at a certain time and they don't come back, which is probably why you often find that most Spurs managers don't give an expected return time, because that's exactly what can happen. Look, I know there's many times when an injury just is difficult to actually evaluate. Sometimes you don't know the rate of the progress of healing and things like that. Sometimes, of course, there can be wrong decisions made and stuff like that. I certainly know a couple of players that's happened to over their careers at various clubs. So, yeah, it's just another one of these. It's like I have no real kind of strong opinion on it other than, unfortunately, he's a fantastic player who Spurs could really do with, and he's not back yet. Hopefully, we'll get some good news on that after these latest scans, and he can be back sooner rather than later. Obviously, there was a couple of questions about Pele today. Obviously, very sadly passed away, one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest. Conte said lots of nice things about him. It's probably, rather than me reading those out, it may be better for you to have a little look at the transcript. Just nice stuff about essentially how he's a fantastic player and also a very humble person, despite how talented he was. And he kind of gave a nice little insight into the fact that his dad was a massive Pele fan, would also always talk about Pele this is Conte obviously, would talk to him about him. Yeah, just nice stuff. I don't want to do it disservice by reading out in my daft voice. What else? He was asked about the 9 games in a row where Spurs are conceded first, and just kept saying it's a very strange situation. His exact quote on this one, because this is less important than Pele. For sure, it's strange. It's a strange situation to concede the first goal, to go down for 9 games in a row. Very strange. I think he thinks it's strange. And at the same time, it's good, our reaction, and then to try to get a result. Many times we do well to win the game, but for sure we have to try from the start of the game, be really focused and go into the game quickly. And also, I think to pay more attention defensively, not concede a chance to our opponent to score first, but we spoke with the players. And maybe when you go to have only to play many games in a row, and you don't have the possibility to work on a tactical aspect, the defensive aspect, I think that you can lose something. But for sure, it's our intention to try and avoid going 1-0, 2-0 down and to start the game in the best possible way. My only gripe with that would be that is absolutely fair pre-World Cup. I'd say since then he's had a bit of time to work with the players on those mental and tactical aspects. So for it to happen again, yeah, I don't quite buy that one for that one. Hopefully this week that stupid run will come to an end. Then came my next 2 questions. So Sky. So Jamie Weir asked the first 4 questions for Sky, and then it was straight on to me. So my question, first one, was about Christian Romero. I just wanted to know how you keep a young player's feet on the ground, really. He's just won the World Cup. Was he 23 years old? You know, how do you stop him from believing he's been there, done it, and bought the T-shirt when you really need him to focus? And to be fair, he said he's absolutely been bang on it, Romero, in training. He said, from what I saw in the last few days during the training sessions, I've seen him with great focus and with great desire to come back and play with us and to go with his mind into Tottenham's situation. For sure, I'm really happy for him, and for us it is important to have in our team 2 World Cup champions in Hugo and Kuti, but he has to know very well that now starts the more difficult period for him because the expectation is going to become high for him. For this reason, he has to work much more and continue to work, especially don't lose the desire to improve himself. Well, that was an interesting answer. It's a good answer. I think Spurs nicked it straight away and tweeted it out because, it's him saying good stuff about having a World Cup winner in the team. And then I followed that up. I wanted to ask about Longley as well. It's a bit of defensive focused questions this week. I guess bearing in mind the bad displays that they've had at the back. I want to ask about Clement Longley 2 things. First off, about his crossing ability, whether that's something that Conte has really been working with him on, or whether it was something that came before. And I also wanted to try and get an idea if he's going to indicate to the club that he wants to extend Longley's loan. So first off, his answer was a good one. When I was asked about the crossing ability, he kind of talked to him as a whole, and it was quite good actually. He said, Clement is a really good player. Don't forget, we're talking about a player that played 5 years in Barcelona. When you play for many years in this type of club with a great story and great importance, it means you are a good player. I think about him, he needed to put himself into a new challenge. When I spoke with him this summer, I was very clear with him. If you come with us and you deserve to play, you will play, and I think you are a really good player with a good personality, good technically. That's what he said to him. His choices in the game are really good, and I can tell you he was a big, big surprise for me in a positive way for his attitude, his commitment and his behaviour. He's always not 100% during a training session. He's 120% if he starts, or if he knows he is not going to start. I think we're talking about a really good player, and our choice was really good. Yes, so not 100%, not even 110%, but apparently 120%. So that was a nice answer. I quite like that on Longley. I wonder whether Spurs will put that out at some point as well. I don't know. And then I followed up with a question about, would you ask the club to sign him permanently after his loan? And he said, I think the club, I don't know the situation about his contract, and you know very well I can make an evaluation about what I see during the training sessions into the pitch. I can make an evaluation and give my opinion to the club, but you know the club has the last decision. It was a bit like, I kind of felt like saying, but Antonio, I asked you for your opinion. That was the whole point. I just wanted to know whether you would want him. I think it's one of those where maybe he'd be wary of if he said, yes, I want him to stay, and then he doesn't. It makes it look like the club's, I don't know, turned him down, or maybe he doesn't want to keep him. Maybe it's the other way. But yeah, that's it's not quite the answer I wanted, but it's fine. It's fine. I squeezed 3 questions in there, so I was happy with that. We normally only get 2. There was an interesting question as well. This lady who I'd never seen her before, but she worked for, it looked perhaps like a broadcast company. I can't remember who it was. I don't know if they said the name, but she asked, are there any Spurs players who impressed you on the training pitches at Hotspur Way during the break before the season restarted? And it's interesting because it's tied in nicely. I'd heard a couple of days back, actually last week, that he's taken a real shine, Conte has, to Pape Matar Sarr, or Pap Matar Sarr as I was told to call him. He's kind of had this time to work with him, and he's actually really been impressed with not only his versatility, but his ability to take on instructions and, just his all-round ability. So it was actually interesting. I was kind of, when I heard this question, I was a bit like, ooh, like my ears pricked up. So, ooh, who's he going to name check? And I'm going to read it out. I'm sorry if there's a lot of reading, but don't worry, we're almost finished with the press conference section. But I just feel it's quite nice with some of these where you get the full context of the answer. So yeah, listen to the players he picks out and see if you can work out the one he didn't mention. For sure, you're right. It was a great opportunity for me and my staff to work with the players, especially with the young players that didn't play in the World Cup. To work with Pape Sarr. He played in the World Cup, but then he came back 2 weeks before and worked with us. I think Pape Sarr is a really good prospect, and I like the 2 weeks we worked after the World Cup with him. It was the same for, he calls him Gil. I think it's pretty much, every Spanish person I know has told me it's Gil. I don't think he's talking about Jill, the tea lady at the lodge. It was the same with Gil, and we exploited this time to work with Skippy again, because Skippy is another player that last season, in my first 2-3 months, he helped me and helped a lot the team. Then he had an injury and he stopped work. It was good for me to work again with him and put him under a bit of pressure, under the tactical aspect, physical aspect, on his body and mind. Also, Harvey White was a good surprise, because we're talking about a young player, but a really clever player that I can ask him to play in every position as he is good to do it. I think it was positive to exploit this time. Also, it was good to bring Matt Doherty. He actually said Doherty randomly. He normally says Matthew, but he just said Doherty. In a good physical condition after a serious injury. It was the same for Japhet Tanganga, because don't forget, it was the same for him. He had a lot of problems with his knee, but during the Christmas period, we worked with him, and for this reason, I gave him the opportunity to play because he deserved his chance. We tried to exploit this period during the World Cup to know much better the young players and work more with them. So, like I say, kind of he did talk about Pape Sarr there, Pape Matar Sarr. I'm not sure whether we're... He's dropped the matter. I don't know what the matter is. That's terrible. But, yes, I don't know whether we're supposed to go Pape Matar Sarr or just Pape Sarr now. Let's see what the club do. I don't know. I'll have to ask around. Not that it's really important in any way, shape or form. But yeah, just interesting that he kind of picked him out straight away and talked about liking the 2 weeks he worked with him as well. So yeah, keep an eye. I think we'll start to see him getting some minutes. This is my hope. Obviously the correlation between all those young players is that Conte doesn't really play them. And I'm hoping, especially with Sarr, maybe we get to see some minutes for him. Got the Portsmouth FA Cup game as well. Maybe he makes his debut in this. Harvey White, having played on loan at Portsmouth, lovely for him to get some minutes as well. But yes, you may have noticed there was one young player that he didn't pick out there, who I actually thought had played well in 2 of the friendlies before he got fever, and that's Jed Spence. There was a part of me that I kind of thought that, and I thought, but maybe he's talking about younger players that aren't first-team players, but then there's Gil in there. I've called him Gil now as well. Gil and Skippy. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it just didn't cross his mind, but for me, that was a little chance to say Jed Spence's name. But there we go. We've talked enough about Jed Spence. We'll talk about it a little bit later as well. We'll talk about the transfer stuff, which we're almost at. almost at. So that was that. Then George Sessions from PA asked. He finished it off with a couple of questions. It was quite an interesting one. He asked about the back three, and he asked Conte, do you actually have a back three in your mind? You know, your best back three, as it were, and would it help you to be able to play that constantly over and over again? So Conte said, you know very well last season we played with Dyer, Kuti and Ben Davies. On the bench was usually Japhet Tanganga and Davinson Sanchez and Joe Rodon. You know we then sent Rodon to play and have more time this season, and we made a substitution with Clement Longley coming in for Rodon. I think all these players have to be able to play, and we work every day with all of these players. For sure there are moments when one player can be in good form and another, maybe he needed a bit of rest to recover well because maybe mentally he's a bit tired or physically. But I trust in my players. You know very well that I trust in my players. We work with them every day to improve the situation. I wonder whether he's going to make a change or two for the Villa game. Obviously, Romero's back. So you'd think he slots straight back in. I don't know. I just wonder whether Eric Dyer is taken out of the firing line for a game. I could be completely wrong. It's purely a hunch. I just wonder whether he's talking here about players being tired mentally or whatever. I just wonder. I know it sounds odd when he's been away at the World Cup, and obviously, it's it's a difficult one with Dyer because physically he only played 33 minutes at the World Cup. Mentally, he's had really the last month to kind of switch off from Spurs, but yet I feel like his performance against Brentford was very much like a continuation of what we saw against in that rush of games ahead of the World Cup. It's a tough one with him. I just does he need a rest? Does he need to be told that nobody's undroppable? Does he need that little bit of competition? Because obviously he's played almost every minute under Conte. And look, I know there's a lot of people that don't like Eric Dyer, and he did make a silly mistake against Brentford, and he makes some silly mistakes at times, but he was really consistent last season. Had a very good season under Conte. Made decent strides, I'd say. It's just now. It's just, I guess, it's just that little reminder. I can take you out the firing line sometimes. Again, it might just be me absolutely having a hunch that's going nowhere, and he may very well start on Sunday. That's before any aggregators go, Gold says he's not going to play. I just wonder whether we might see a Davies, Longley, Romero back three. I don't know. I just wonder. We'll see. And then the last question of the bunch from George was about Romero, saying obviously he struggled with these injuries this season, end of last season, pre-World Cup as well. I think he had two, didn't he? He had an injury at the start of the season and also just before the World Cup. And so he asked, is it too much pressure to say his return could make the difference with the Spurs defence? And so Conte said, we're talking about a good player, an important player for us. It's true that he had injuries this season at the start and also last season. For this reason, it's important to have a good squad because when there are these types of injuries, you need to have players ready to play well and don't pay a lot about the difference in the level. I think he's saying you don't lose a lot in the difference in quality. I think Romero will be fine. I think he's going to have this confidence now. I think he's tasted, I guess, the biggest silverware of all. I don't know whether he's actually tasted it. I don't know, that sounded weird. But you know what I mean. And now whether he wants to feel that on a club level. And by doing that, one way is to push on under Conte, who very much sees him as a terrific prospect, who's a very important player, but also has a lot more to do to reach his ceiling, he feels. You can see that. He's always saying there's more and more he can do. No player really has ever finished, I don't think. I think sometimes some of the older defenders. So yeah. So there you go. That was the press conference. There's a couple more questions that are coming later tonight from the embargo section, which if people don't understand what the embargo section is, it's a bit for the national newspapers to be able to have a story for the morning, but we put them out online, or they do as well, at 10:30 the night before they're going in the newspapers. So yeah, it's. I'm trying to think if there's anything in there that's I can't say, obviously, because this is going before that 10:30 deadline. It's some interesting stuff. I'd go so hard to say that. I wouldn't say. No, it's interesting stuff. I can't even. I can't even say what it's about. But honestly, have a little look. It's worth the read. Yeah, I'll have it. Check on my Twitter account. I've put it out. I've written it already, and it will be going out at 10:30. So there you go. So yeah, sorry. You can tell that I'm also getting various messages out. This is the trouble when you put out a million different questions to various people about loads of stuff, and you get kind of back and forth when you're actually trying to also do something like this. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on to the transfer stuff. Just need to reply to this. That's really weird. I'm just replying with it. There you go. The fun and games of that. So let's move on to transfer stuff. It's purely because if something interesting came in, I'd try and sneak it into the video as well if there was something new. But yeah, so January transfer window. Let's get on to that. That was entirely unprofessional. I do apologise. Not that these are normally the most professional things in the world, but like I say, sometimes it's worth replying to stuff just in case there's something extra I can tell you within this. So, transfer window opens Sunday, isn't it? New Year's Day. Obviously, we know that Spurs need, or Conte wants at least a couple of new faces. So, a lot of talk about what there will be finance-wise and what there's to come. Obviously, we still wait to see what happens with the remaining 50 million of the the capital increase that ENIC put in. That has to be taken out by the end of the year. So we shall see. There's 2 days left of that. We'll see what happens with that. But obviously, this is something that's been well publicised. At the time, when was it? Was it May they put out that statement? So we shall see whether that gives them a boost or not, if they take it. I guess we'll find out when the financial report finally comes out. That would be very helpful. I don't know what I'm in my eyes. It's just been nice to be able to report on it when you're constantly being told that, no, it's on its way, and it hasn't yet appeared. But there you go. We shall find out, no doubt, about that 50 million then. But it would seem strange not to take it, because for ENIC it increases their share of, or ownership share of the club, which presumably they'd want. And on the flip side, it gives Spurs more money to play with. So, a win-win-win, as Michael Scott says in The Office. But, yeah, I don't know. There's always strange decisions made. So, we shall find out on that one. They'll have to declare it. So, pretty much, let me just check, because I do have Company's House up right now. So, been no update as of right now when I'm doing this on there. So, obviously, the key now when it comes to transfer window is what positions, where and when. And what you do as a club is you try and work out a plan for not only this transfer window, but you do one also for the next transfer window at least. And sometimes, some clubs, hopefully, you should really have a rough plan of what you want to do. Obviously, circumstances can change, but you have a rough idea maybe when contracts are coming to an end, when players are getting older and you want to bring in a younger equivalent, or just purely upgrades you want. So from what I understand, look, this will change. Other people have different info. Like I say, what I just spent pretty much yesterday and a little bit the day before doing was just contacting every single person that's going to be involved in this transfer window, whether that be agents, whether that be managers, whether that be people connected to families of players, whether that be people within Tottenham, whether it be people within other clubs. It was a bit of a manic day. I was supposed to write the story I was writing for about, I think I was originally planning to get it out about 1. It didn't end up going till about 3:30, just because you keep getting stuff back. Like I say, even getting stuff back today. So you keep getting bits and pieces back as well. So it's a strange job. It's a strange job, the kind of gathering of information, because you try and gather as much as you can, but then on the flip side, there can be inconsistencies to that information. There can be things that are right in one moment and then are wrong in the next because of a change in, like I say, circumstances for be a player or a club. So what I tried to do was take a consensus of the information. So if I was hearing a certain thing that was cropping up in every different place from independent sources, then for me, that's something I can go with. I've always said this before. I don't really go with stuff that's from one source. I try to get it backed up by 2, if not 3 sources every time at least. So from what I can understand, the thinking is, and like I say, other people have different opinions on this and they'll have different things from their sources. But from what I understand is that Spurs are looking for an attacking player as a priority, whether that be someone that can play as a striker and or winger. Like I've always said, if you could find a player that's versatile enough to do that and also kind of play as an attacking kind of deeper midfielder if needed, would be great. But just an attacking player is what I'm told. So that's one. And then the other one is, if they can, and I think this would very much involve someone heading out the door, they would also like to bring in another right wing back. And of course, who that player would be, from what I can understand, it would appear to be that they're listening to offers, or they would listen to offers for Emerson Royal. Again, that's kind of dependent on that, I think. Purely because of the situation you get yourself in with 4 right wing backs. Obviously, you could loan out Jed Spence, which I think that, if it's going to happen, would be a decision taken towards the end of the window, depending on if anything does happen. But like I say, I think those are the 2 priorities that I think Conte has kind of stressed as an importance for his squad as an attacker. I think you can see that right now, why that's a need, because you've got Richarlison out until at least mid-January. You've got Lucas out for an indefinite amount of time right now with this inflamed tendon, which has become a real problem. And you've got Brian Hill, or Jill, as Conte calls him, who, as much as he praises him, unfortunately, he's not playing football. He's not playing... he just doesn't seem to be trusted yet. He's 21. Physically, of course, he's not a Conte player. And at this moment in time, you'd think that he's more likely to go out on loan next month. I'm sure he'd love to go back to Valencia, obviously. I think he thought he was going back there in the summer. So attacker kind of makes complete sense. I think the wing-back it's just, as I've said a billion times, it's to make the system work. Because the Conte system requires these flying wing-backs. And Emerson was not signed for Conte. He's had a good old stab at it. I do think as a normal right back, I think he's a perfectly good right back. I think, and we've seen that. We've seen that in games where he's played as more of a right back, and I think he's had good games against sometimes the big clubs as well. But ask him to be a wing back and ask him to attack, and it just doesn't quite work. So I think Spurs would listen to offers for him, but of course you've got to see what comes in. And I think that's the thing. It's very. They could easily go out and just get easy. It's not that easy. It's a January window, but they could just go out and get a right wing back. But then if you're going to have 4, then you've just got a ridiculous squad situation. So I do think the wing back situation will depend on what happens with outgoings, purely from that squad sense. And there's also the homegrown angle, if it was a non-homegrown player that they were looking at as well. So they're the two priorities from what I'm told. But on top of that, as this is the January transfer window, although you could say it's the same with the summer, they will look at any opportunities that arise. Because sometimes, this is a window where unexpected little kind of openings can happen, where a club at the last minute gets desperate because they want to sign a certain player, so they have to make some money or move things around, and suddenly a player you didn't expect becomes available. I guess last year's a perfect example. Spurs end up with Bentancur and Kulusevski, who Juventus deemed surplus to requirements, and they end up being two season-changing players for Tottenham. So when I say that those two positions are the priority, you can't rule out other positions because you don't know what will occur. But what I've been told is the summer plan currently, like I say, unless anything changes within this window, is that Spurs would like to nail down a new left-sided centre-back and a centre-back who can play on the right or in the centre if required of a back three. So that's two. And also, they'd like next summer to get or to secure the person who will eventually become the long-term successor for Hugo Lloris, whether that is next season or, with a mind to the season afterwards, which makes sense. He signed up to a deal till 2024. So really, yes, this is probably the summer, isn't it, where you start to focus on that position. It's not to say that Lloris will next season start to wane or his abilities will start to decline. That's not saying that at all. It's just you have to start thinking about the future. He turned 36 on Boxing Day. So he may well be able to, one of these players who keeps himself very well, so he may be able to play into his late 30s, maybe later, or you never know. Today's world with goalkeepers. But it makes sense to me. So that is what I'm told is the plan. Let's start drilling down into that a little bit. I know we've seen Conte's come out in recent weeks with the policy thing about the young players, but not big salaries with the club. I think that's the Tottenham way, but it doesn't always mean it has to be the way. We've seen Perisic, we've seen Forster come in, we've seen Richarlison was a big signing, £60 million signing, 50, I think it was 50 in the main part with the remaining 10, I think, later. I can't remember the breakdown now, but 60 in all. And obviously he's 25, or he was, so it's not like they were signing a young player for a fee that will only go up kind of thing. They do go against that. So hopefully, it doesn't mean it's just going to be a kid coming in that Spurs aren't going to sign. And I don't think it would be, to be honest, because that would just be daft. From what I've been told, there's a possibility it could be a bit like last year in that one's a permanent deal for a bit of chunk of money, and that the other one would be a loan to buy. Like I say, I'm saying the idea is to try and get in two, but you can never rule out three because, like I say, if an opportunity arises, even if that third one is a young person, a young player with a bright prospect for the future, that's the other way that might go. Or they could shock us all and just buy a third ready-made player. Wow. There's that. I've said this before, but the idea with this window is the summer window was very much about increasing his squad numbers with quality as well, but also fleshing it out so he had more balance across the squad. Because obviously last January they brought in Kulusevski and Bentancur, but then they lost 4 players from the squad, so they only brought in 2. So that's why we got to the end of the season with injuries, and he had about 4 or 5 academy bench players that he was never going to use. So the summer was very much about building a better squad for him, and he's kind of at the level he likes with pretty much 2 for every position, although you technically got 3 right wing backs. And then this window was very much about just trying to upgrade on a couple of those positions, whether that be a straight upgrade or whether it be an upgrade so that a young player can go out and develop, like a Brian Hill, like, I don't know, maybe a Papsar, although, like I say, it's taken a shine to him now. Maybe it becomes a Jed Spence or a Japhet Tanganga or something like that. But just to have a player that can come in as a ready-made player. So that's what they're looking for. It's purely a quality aspect now. which is difficult in the January window, but there's no reason that they can't get it done, especially if they've been working and planning it for long enough. So there seems to be a desire to keep Conte happy, as there should be, especially with his future still unresolved. And, the injury he's got at the moment, like I say, with no Richarlison or Lucas, and Sonny obviously had his injury worry before the World Cup. Kulusevski's been out as well. So that attacking one is quite important, especially with Brian Hill really needing that loan. And then you look across at Liverpool, who've just signed Cody Gakpo. And I was just looking at their options now. They've got Gakpo, Salah, Jota, Diaz, Nunes, Firmino. And they're like 5 points just behind Tottenham now. So Conte must look at that and just think, I literally turned to my bench the other day and I didn't know who to bring on. So he does. So these, I'm going to say some players that I know that either the club or Paratici or Conte like. This is not saying that this is the definitive list, because I noticed that aggregator accounts did that with my article the other day, such as say, these are the targets. So that's not the case. These are players that they like. Hopefully they'll be cool for me because I've mentioned them, that maybe someone from within these players will be someone they sign, but it could be someone else as well. These are just some of the names that came up when I was talking to various people and contacts yesterday. So the first one, I understand Paratici is a big admirer of, I think you pronounce it Tete, Tete, 22-year-old Brazilian midfielder, currently on loan at Lyon from Shakhtar Donetsk. Scored 6 goals, laid on 3 assists in his 14 Ligue 1 games this season. But since Laurent Blanc came in, he's found starts a little bit harder to come by. I think he's only started something like 2 in the last 6 games, something like that. And I think a lot of Premier League clubs have been alerted to his potential availability next month. So he's maybe one to look on, keep an eye on. Like I say, Paratici is a big fan of his. Obviously, we all know about Ruslan Malinowski, the Atalanta. He's a more experienced guy. Obviously, he's 29 compared to the 22-year-old Tete. He's obviously been a player of interest for Spurs for a little while, and his contract is out this coming summer. So, of course, financially, and he's not starting too much for Atalanta at the moment, Ukrainian. So, potentially that's someone that they could maybe consider. I know the club have liked Martin Terrier. He plays up front for Rennes. Obviously, Spurs got a good relationship with Rennes. That's where Joe Rodon went, although we'll talk about Joe Rodon a little bit later. Terrier can play anywhere across the front three. Scored 11 goals in 20 matches in Ligue 1 and Europa League, so he's having a very good season. What I would say about him is that Rennes, I think they're 3rd in Ligue 1 at the moment. They turned down some big offers for him in the summer. I think Newcastle, I think I'd heard potentially they maybe even offered as much as something like 40 million and it got turned down. He's got a long contract till 2026, so I just wonder with them in 3rd place, it would just take an astronomical bid, and I don't know whether Spurs pay that sort of money in this window for a player who would not. Oh, it's a difficult one. I suppose it'd be a slight gamble. Whether you pay a big money for a player you know is going to hit the ground running in the Premier League, only because of the way they've been burnt. Obviously, Tanguy came from the French League as well, and they've had a few from the French League over the years. But certainly he's obviously a player that I know they like. Paratici, I'm told, talking of ready-made Premier League players, is a big fan of Harvey Barnes at Leicester. Obviously, that's a very difficult one to do. 25 now, 6 goals in 14 Premier League games this month. He'd have a big price tag, you think. 2.5 years, proven in the Premier League. I like him. On a personal note, I do really like him. But I struggle to see why Leicester would want to get rid of him. So like I say, it's a player I know Paratici really likes. But whether that is a player that ends up making his way to Tottenham Hotspur one day is another thing. Obviously, we know about the James Maddison speculation that's been in the past as well. But whether... I'd love to see James Maddison at Tottenham, but whether that's exactly... I think whether they're looking for a further up the pitch kind of player or not. But, if a player like that were to become available for some reason for a reasonable fee, I don't know. I don't know. But another interesting one, is not left field, I guess, but slightly different because he's playing in a second tier right now, is that I was told that Paratici really likes Ismail Assar, Watford, 24-year-old. Obviously, he played at the World Cup with Senegal, wasn't it? He scored as well. So he's got 6 goals and 3 assists from 19 championship matches so far. And I know, a lot of people going, oh, why would you sign a player from the Championship and all this? But what I would say is I was looking up his stats as well. He's got 18 months left in his deal, but he's also scored 10 goals and 8 assists from his 50 Premier League games, which, bearing in mind, was for a Watford side that was struggling as well. He wasn't doing that for a top team, so he's got 18 goal involvements. So it's almost a goal involvement, not quite every other game, which, isn't that bad. He can play anywhere against the front three as well. Perhaps it could be someone they look at if they can't secure a first choice, perhaps. But yeah, he's not a bad player, honestly. I think sometimes we see these kind of sexy, exciting players for big money, and sometimes those closer at home aren't too bad. Again, not saying that it's definitely a player they're going for, just saying these are players that are liked within the club and by Paratici. Obviously, the one that's going to be linked every single window when you're talking about attacking players is Wilfried Zaha. I put him in there because I certainly know, I think he's still with Base. I think he's still with CA Base. He's changed a couple of agents in the last couple of years, Zaha. But obviously, he's been someone that, and the reason I say that is because Base have a very strong relationship with Spurs. I think they may also do Porro as well. Yeah, I think they do. So yeah, it's whether of all the times you'd actually think it would make sense for Spurs, it's when Zaha's in the last 6 months of his contract. However, with Conte talking about young players with small wages, Zaha turned 30 last month. He'll be on a hefty wage, I'd imagine, as well. And I guess you've also got the other issue of, because he's in the last 6 months of his contract, from Sunday he'll be able to talk to foreign clubs about a free transfer in the summer, which would be probably much more lucrative for him as well. So yeah, that'd be a difficult one. But he's had a decent season. 6 goals, 2 assists in 14 Premier League games as well. He'd add to the homegrown quota as well. I think, attacking-wise, I think he would be brilliant going forward for Spurs. Defensively, and the work rate that Conte would require in that aspect of the game, I don't know whether he quite fits or not. But I've put him in there purely because obviously it's a player that Spurs have liked. And if ever there was a time when financially he's not going to cost a lot of money, it would be now. And I know some people out there really like Zaha as well. Obviously, Spurs have had a big interest in Anthony Gordon at Everton previously. It looks like, despite all of the evident interest and Everton turning down some big kind of money temptation from other clubs, looks like, certainly from the local reporters that end, that potentially he might end up signing a new deal at Everton. Obviously, he's only 21. I think I said this at the time, where I like the idea of him coming to Spurs, but from my point of view, if I was in his head as a 21-year-old playing week in, week out for Everton, why would I want to give that up for a bit part role at Spurs? I think it's a bit too early for him to make that big move myself, and that looks to be maybe what his advisors have told him as well. And then I've shoved him in there because I know some people like him. Adama Traore, he is in the last 6 months of his Wolves deal as well now. And we know, I've told you, Paratici is a huge fan of Adama Traore, and presumably his baby oil as well. His oiled up arms. Do you remember, I think I said I saw him ahead of the Wolves game just staring at him as he was warming up. I was thinking, yep, you like a bit of Adama Traore. He'll be able to talk to foreign clubs as well next month. But there's some talk that Wolves would like to keep him if they can. I don't think he's starting every game. I think he's quite irregular starts now. So he may want another challenge as well. So attacking-wise, that's just some of the names that kind of sprung out of a lot of the conversations I had. I'm sure there'll be many more that come up in the weeks ahead. Paratici's contact list is ridiculous. You know, I kind of feel like I know a fair few people in the game, especially obviously UK and certainly on the continent a few as well. But Paratici, honestly, it's I wouldn't even dare to compare my kind of contacts with someone like that. It's incredible. He is on just, you know, I'd say even other people in the UK game, his contact level is ridiculous. So there will be many, many, many more names that come out. There'll be a lot of names that agents just link or agents push to people for the sake of, you know, getting their client's name out there so that they can have or garner interest, or whether it be a new contract, and that will happen. Like I say, I've kind of cross-checked all of those with other people as well. So it's not like I just got those names from one person. That's the way I think you're meant to do it, really. So there's attacking players. There'll be many more, and I'm sure in the comments you'll suggest many more as well. But like I say, they're the names that came up. So I don't want to put anyone in there that didn't come up. Wing back, like I say, I think it is very dependent on Emerson Royal and what happens with him. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I say, La Liga, he was a very good right back there. I would imagine there's clubs in La Liga that would want him back. Serie A, I think there's been interest as well. In the past, I should stress. So we'll have to see what kind of comes in this window. We all know about Pedro Porro. Obviously, Spurs got a strong interest there. While I said before, there's some doubts. He's 5'7", I think. So there's some doubts over physically. He ticks the boxes for a Conte wing-back. You know, Conte wants his wing-backs to be flying in at the back post to head in crosses from the other wing-back. So whether at 5'7", he's the man that can get on the end of those sort of things, I don't know. Ruben Amorim, the sporting boss, pretty much said this week that anyone looking to sign Porro would have to pay the release clause, which seems to be reported as £39.7 million. So here's was his quotes. Amorim: with regards to Pedro Porro, we know that there are players in our team who, because of what they've done, are now wanted by other clubs. We had this problem in the summer too. What I was told is that he can only leave if the clause is triggered. And if the clause is triggered, there is nothing we can do. He is playing really well. Like me, he is living one of the best moments of his career, and he's only focused on sporting. We are prepared for anything, and we know that there are clubs who can pay the clause. But until that happens, I think Pedro is safe. So yeah, see what happens. It's kind of, they've set the bar, that's the price. And yeah, if Spurs desperately want him, they sign him. But then, like I say, that's £40 million on a player. You would have to be getting Emerson out that door if that's the player. I think the logic behind Emerson going rather than Doherty is that Doherty is more versatile, being able to play on the left as well, and is a more natural wing-back as well. So other players in that position that I understand Paratici likes. One is Vanderson, 21-year-old Monaco player. He's able to play anywhere down the right-hand side. He's got a contract till 2027 though, so they could ask for quite a big fee for him. Obviously, we all know about Denzel Dumfries, Inter player, who's been linked with Spurs a lot. 26-year-old, obviously had an eye-catching few moments at the World Cup as well for the Netherlands. But I think, from what I understand, his big fee Inter are looking for him. They've turned down a couple of approaches from clubs for him. There's one young, he's the same age as Vanderson, but big talent on the up in France is Malo Gusto, 21-year-old who plays for Lyon. League One regular, last couple of seasons, loads of European experience, so really seen as one of the next big talents in French football. 18 months left in his contract, which isn't too long. It ticks a lot of the boxes. I would say, I was looking at some of his stats, attacking wise, obviously he'd have to develop, and I think he's only got 1 assist this season, 5 in the previous campaign. But definitely, a potential one for the future, you'd think there. Yeah, so they're kind of a few of the names that kind of were dropped to me about people that Paratici likes. So again, there will be others that come out of the woodwork as well. There's a lot of right wing backs out there in the world. What else? I guess like I say, if an opportunity arises in another position, they'll certainly look at it. This is why I'll only say that those two are the priority. I wouldn't ever say that they're the only two positions they're looking for players in, because, if an opportunity that was too good to be true turned up. I mean, let's say a good example is Frank Kessie at Barcelona. So at the moment, the chances of Frank Kessie leaving Barcelona are very slim. He doesn't want to leave Barcelona from what's everything's been saying in the local press there, and Xavi wants to keep him. The only way, and he's only been there, 6 months, if that? The only way is potentially if Barcelona suddenly needed money, and whether, they had to force someone out the door. But it would sound like he would be an unlikely candidate, bearing in mind Xavi wants to keep him. The reason I mention Kessie is because I'm told that Conte loves him. Conte's a big fan. Obviously, he won the Serie A with AC Milan Kessie last season. And obviously, Conte being a former Inter Milan man will know very well about his kind of cross-city rivals. I say cross-city rivals, they play in the same stadium, so not really cross-city. So the reason I mention him is that's the kind of thing I mean. So if he were to become available, I saw some reports saying like 15 million, which would be, I can't see how it'd be that. But yeah, so if something was to happen like that, if a player that they'd had on their radar as a potential for the summer suddenly became available, then why not push it forward? I mean, Liverpool are a good case in point. Luis Diaz, Spurs decided to go for him last January. Liverpool had planned to try and sign him in the summer. Suddenly they moved up their plans, signed him in January, and obviously, he got another 6 months under his belt, kind of adapting to the Premier League. So, yeah. I can only go on what I'm told. So I'm told that the club's priorities are an attacking player and a right wing back. The right wing back, again, being dependent on getting someone out of the club. But if other opportunities come up, hopefully they'll take them if there's something that they just cannot pass up on, because it would be actually benefiting them in the long term as well. So I think the issue mainly, when I keep hearing links to defensive midfielders, I guess Kessie is one as well, or more defensively minded than attacking minded, is that you've got Bentancur, you've got Højbjerg, you've got Bissouma, you've got Skip, you've got Sarr as a bright prospect as well. It's like, at what stage do you just end up crowding that area with too many players in your squad? Like I say, Conte loves Kessie. Paratici adores Weston McKennie. But does it make sense to bring them in right now? Obviously, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if Bentancur's injury were to prove to be worse, maybe that would be a trigger. Maybe. But there doesn't seem to be an indication that it's going to be a serious long-term injury or something like that right now. So which is, for me, is why the midfield ones don't really make sense. And I mean, when it comes to, let's say, centre-backs, I mean, Conte, as I said in my last video, was very clear about it the other day, actually, from the man's lips himself. I don't need a centre-back. He said, we're good at centre-back. Whether you agree with that or not, and, I've said myself, my scenario where I could see that changing is Japhet Tanganga, for me, desperately needs minutes. So if Japhet were to head off on loan, let's say, or if they chose to sell him, that's when you bring in a centre-back now to kind of take that place. But then I think the Longley loan, that's a lot of L's, the Longley loan really does kind of lend itself to buying a new defender next summer. It does, because there's no purchase option on it. So it is very much a placeholder signing, and it may well be that they sign Longley. Like I say, I asked Conte about it today, whether he wants him. And it may be that next summer, if they were to be able to get him for 10, 15 million, let's say, because Barcelona need the money and clearly doesn't seem to have a future there, I think he'd be a terrific squad player. I like Longley. I think he's a good player. I think he's still got to keep adapting to the Premier League and the pace of it, but certainly also offensively he offers a lot as well. I do wonder whether he'd be better actually in the centre than he would be on the left. So yeah, maybe that is a potential long-term option if he is able to impress in the second half of the season. Or we know Conte loves Bastoni. He waits until next summer, and that's the player that he brings in for the left of that back three. Like I say, I think they're going to look for a couple next summer. So yeah, it's an interesting one to kind of look at as well. Like I say, he did rule out the centre-back move, but I presume if Tanganga were to go out on loan, then he'd be able to walk back those comments a little bit in that respect as well. What anyone else. Loan deals heading out the club. You know, like I say, Tanganga, Hill, potentially Spence, Harvey White desperately needs a loan. Alfie Devine, I think, desperately needs a loan now as well. We'll see what happens with Mate Sarr. If Conte is going to start giving him minutes, then no, absolutely keep him around, keep him developing at the club. And then we'll see where that goes. But if not, by all means, get him out there playing regular football in the second half of the season. As for players out on loan, Giovanni Lo Celso, there is that break clause. So if a club were to offer money for Lo Celso, Spurs would be able to bring him back and then sell him. But obviously, he has to have a say in that. He can't just be traded to another club if he doesn't want to go from Villarreal. And obviously, maybe his injury will lessen the chance of that, his pre-World Cup injury. Joe Rodon, from what I understand, there is a possibility he could come back if all parties agreed on it, as in for him then to get another loan elsewhere. I don't think he probably would come back to play at Spurs because you'd imagine he wouldn't get a lot of game time. What's happened at Rennes, if you're not aware, he was starting almost every game and then he got suspended for a red card and I think he was ill. And then after that, hasn't really been able to get back into the team regularly before the World Cup. And now, I'm trying to think if they've played since. But certainly, I think that's a situation they're going to look at over the next couple of weeks. And then if Rennes, Rodon and Spurs all want it, then yes, they could bring that loan to a premature end and he goes elsewhere. Or hopefully he starts playing matches and does it. Because I think it's a good club for him. It is a good club for him. And I think he is, certainly is adapting to life there. It's just whether he gets the minutes, because that's the main thing. Don't send him out and don't get minutes. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating transfer window. It was quite interesting doing this because I like to wait till nearer to its opening before I start to do the big first call of agents and managers and everything, because otherwise you just get a lot of early speculation, which can often come to absolutely nothing. So as the weeks go on, we'll kind of hone this closer and closer into who they're signing. In an ideal world, they'd have sorted it out early and get these things done. But January transfer window doesn't always work with this. I know Liverpool are going to got Gakpo, and that's absolutely fair play. They've smashed that one out of the park. Hopefully he'll be a very good player. Looks like he could be. Maybe Spurs do need to take a leaf out of that book and kind of move quite quickly in the window. I'm sure we'll find out quite swiftly where their thoughts lie and who's likely to come in the door. Right, but I'm going to head off now. Villa on Sunday. I'm not sure when I'll be able to do the next video. Probably Monday at some point. We'll have a good old chat about that. Hopefully Spurs get back on the right track. Whether Eric Dyer starts or not, I don't know. But I really hope the aggregators don't go, oh, Gold says, because there's been a lot of the there's a lot of the older aggregator accounts that I have always gotten very well with, and some very nice people run them. But I feel like there's a little bit of a new breed of them. I don't know what the expression is for them, of a group of them, who just do stuff very quickly. They take stuff very quickly. They put it out there without any context. And then I get the stick for it when it hasn't really been put out right, whether the wording's wrong compared to what I said or whether it just didn't sit within the context of what I said. It's not the biggest deal in the world. But yeah, it'd just be nice to put a bit more attention into it. Maybe even just link back to the video, the article, or whatever it is, just so people can get an idea then of what the context was from it, rather than the random things. I swear there are some people out there that maybe only know of things I've said or written by something an aggregator account put a line out of, which I'd hope isn't a fair representation of the things that I might come out with sometimes, but I don't know. That was not meant to be a rant. It was just something I just noticed, and I've been noting it. I don't know whether it's because the transfer window's coming, there's been a bit more of a desperation, I don't know. But there you go. It's part of the fun and games of it all. Right, time to head off. Enjoy your weekends. Honestly, Happy New Year this time. I'm hoping, unless any massive breaks, this will be the last video before 2023 comes around. And hopefully Spurs start the new year with a bang and put in a really good performance. You'd think the team kind of picks itself, other than that maybe a change up in defence. Lloris back in. You'd think the front three keep playing there unless he goes a midfield three, which I don't think he would. But you never know. But that front three, you'd think all play. Hopefully Sonny rediscovers his form for 2023. That would be great. Harry Kane keep on scoring would be terrific. I'd like to see Matt Doherty get an assist or a goal. That'd be terrific for him. So there you go. Right, going to head off. Yeah, have a lovely new year. Wish you all the best health and happiness, all of you. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.